world with so much content and information flying around us at Mach 10 all the time, taking notes is one of the highest leverage activities that you can partake in. Now, there's all kinds of solutions to note taking in the modern era, and I've tried them all. I've tried typing my notes, I've tried putting them in a Word document, I've tried written notes, and I've tried the hybrids like Remarkable where you can have a digital form of written notes. But I'm here to tell you today that after 4 years of undergraduate study as well as 1 year of diligent note taking, written notes have been a game changer for me and my personal growth. And so I want to walk you through my journey to get to a place where written notes are a regular part of my life. And so we're going to talk about all that today. I am super excited. Let's get right into it. So written notes are unique in that when you write a written note, whether it's with pen or pencil, really, it's a very permanent type of action. Once you make a note, then there's kind of no going back. Obviously, with a pencil, you can erase and those types of things. Say, if you make an entry in a journal or a notebook and you look back on it a month later, are you going to really change anything? Are you going to update that? It's kind of concrete what that note is. And that's very glaring as far as written notes. All the imperfections that you might have made in that notebook, all those types of things remain. And that's just something that doesn't happen in a digital space. There's spell check and things that you can change later. It's not really the same tactile feeling that a written notebook is. And so that's one of the things about a written notebook that I really like. The second thing is that I think it's much better for memory. When you write something down, you're using a part of your brain that studies have shown to connect better to your internal memory. And so what that means is that when you take typed notes, that does not contribute as much to your active memory capabilities as much as written notes do. And so when you're trying to write something down and actually remember the stuff that you're writing down, written notes are much better for those types of applications. Thirdly, they're much less distracting. I don't know how many times you guys have experienced this, but if I try and take notes or even read off of my phone, I get distracted instantly. I'm swiping up and over to, Instagram or YouTube or whatever. But with a physical notebook, you can block out all of that noise and truly focus on the thing that you are trying to record. That's a really big factor for me as far as written notes, is that you don't have to risk getting distracted by your device while you're trying to take, important and valuable notes. I would also say that written notes are much more pleasant. If you're trying to take notes on your phone, you're like, you're looking at the screen that you look at all the time. You're texting to yourself and trying to make it like, how good should I make this? How, you're making all these evaluations. But with a physical notebook, you can have a completely different experience than what you usually interact with on digital devices. I think it's very important that the note-taking process is something that you actually enjoy. If you're someone who enjoys digital notes, then, more power to you. But I think, especially for myself, that written notes have been a huge game changer in the pleasantness of the note-taking experience. The other thing that I'd say is that it's so much easier to unplug with a physical notebook. I can take this thing, here, I'll just show you my notebook right now. I can take this thing wherever I want, and I could leave my phone at home. If I want to go to the park, or if I want to go to a coffee shop, and I want to completely unplug from my normal, daily routine of checking my phone every 15 seconds, I can do that with a physical notebook. There's always going to be a factor to where your brain is not completely locked in on the notes that you're taking because you're on a digital device. That's just my opinion. You can take it how you wish, but I think that that is a huge plus for physical notes. I think you can also take better notes. Because you're writing in a more permanent way, in a more tactile way, you feel like you have to care about the notes that you're taking a little bit more. Digitally, I feel like, if I'm typing out notes and it's just stream of consciousness, I can type, but then I lose some of the density of the information that I'm trying to capture in the note. And so written notes make you think, how should I phrase this best so that I don't have to write more than I need to? And I feel like that's a really valuable thing. The other thing is that it's much more flexible. You can draw on a physical notebook in ways that you can't draw with digital means. If you're typing notes, there's no way for you to just make a graphic of the thing that you're picturing or the thing that you're trying to record. In a physical notebook, you get to draw, you can draw a table, you can draw a diagram, you can draw a graph, and those things are not limited to you. And so flexibility as far as written notes is a huge factor to me personally. So you're thinking, James, how do I take notes in a helpful way? Because I might take notes and then I never look at them. Well, this is my philosophy with taking notes in general. Firstly, your brain is always going to be more powerful than whatever notes you put down. And so the trick with notes is not to write down everything that was important, but write down the main ideas that will trigger your brain to go through the actual, memories that you have of the principle or topic that you were thinking of. Quick bullet points, main ideas, those types of things. Secondly, notes are for revisiting important ideas and information. And so if you're just recording notes, just for the sake of recording notes, like I had an apple today. If you're doing a journal, then you can write whatever in your journal. But for notes, for taking notes about life and important things in life, what you want to do is you want to distill your notebook and your notes down to the things that are important. Because the purpose of having a notebook is so that you can look back on the things that you thought were important at the time and that you want to remember. And so in order to reduce the fluff in your notebook, consider how dense the information that you're writing down is. So those are the two things that I think are very important. And there's a third one as well. Note-taking is a focused activity. You can't be thinking about other things while you're note-taking. You have to distill down the information that you're receiving in whatever form it comes into a way that you can understand later on. And so in order to do that, you actually have to focus on what you're doing and not be distracted. So it also is an exercise in focus. So what kind of notebook then should I get? Maybe you're convinced. Maybe you're like, James, this sounds great. I should take written notes. But every time I get a notebook or something like that, it's just not something that I enjoy writing in. Well, this is something that I came across as well early in my written note-taking journey. What you want to do is you want to make it as comfortable a note-taking process as you can. And the things that I look for in a notebook will dictate some of those aspects. So the first thing, brand, I don't think matters. Now, this might be because I'm cheap and I just haven't experienced the glories of a solid notebook, and that is totally fair. But I don't think brand matters too much. If you want to start note-taking, you should just start note-taking with whatever you can get your hands on. And so these are the criteria that I would break down as far as those notebooks. First, I'd get one that's simple. You don't want like a bunch of graphics, dates, lines separating things. I think that makes it much harder to take creative notes that will be helpful for you in the future, because it limits your brain. If there's a margin and then a main writing block, then I think it's more distracting than helpful. But that's just me. I would get something that's either dotted or ruled or just plain. Those three I think are great. Graph paper, in my opinion, is not ideal, because unless you're doing all kinds of sketches and drawings or math equations or whatever that require graph paper in a more real way, I think it's just too busy for regular notes. So that's what I'd caution you on. Graph paper, not my favorite, but dotted, ruled, and plain notebooks are fantastic. Also, get a notebook that lays flat on the table. When I first started writing written notes, I would get these notebooks that would curl in the middle, and I would have to push down with one hand and note take with the other hand. And it was very hard to make neat, precise marks when you're fighting the journal that you're working in. And so what I would recommend is that you get a journal or a notebook that lays flat on the table when you're not touching it. And that was huge for me because now I can have my notebook open, like on the table, and I can get a drink of water, I can pick up the book, I can pick up my phone, I can do things and not lose my spot in my notebook because it is laying completely flat on the table. I'd get one with a hard cover. The reason for getting a hard cover instead of like a soft cover notebook is because it's more durable, it's easier to lay flat on the table like I was saying before, and also you can kind of cheat with it a little bit more in my opinion, where you could put a sticky note down and it'll like be flat. You have a little bit of rigidity to play with. I think it's just nicer. That's just me. But, whatever, at the end of the day, whatever works for you, for your note-taking journey, then by all means. But these are my suggestions that have worked for me. Okay, so how do I actually write notes? Now, there's a couple different things that I want to go through here, because there's the content as far as the words that you use. But what I think is even more important sometimes is the style with which you organize the notes that you make. And so that's what I want to talk about right now. So let's take a look at the way that I write notes. This actually is these are the notes from the actual video that I'm taking right now. And so what I want to show you is a little bit of how I take notes by flipping through. We'll go back a day. One of the things that's super important is when you take notes to use symbols in a way where it will actually be helpful for you in your note taking. And so something that you can see that I do really frequently is if I have a video idea and I say how I take written notes, I put a VI right here so that I can look back and I can say, oh, this was a video idea. I put an I for just an idea. I wrote down for myself, are there AI opportunities to check general notes? How could I build an AI agent for that? BFC stands for Bastion Financial Coaching. That's for my business. If I have an idea for some way to improve the business, then that's something that I do. So taking notes doesn't have to be just like I'm numbering, I'm bulleting. You can make different types of symbols that will help you remember what the heck you were writing about. The second thing that I would suggest is if you're writing down notes on a particular video or meeting or topic or whatever, write down the name and the date of the thing that you're writing down. So you might think, what's the point of doing that when it's in my notes already? It doesn't really matter. Well, it helps a lot because if you look back on the things that you were learning at a particular point in time, then you can fit together a little bit more, what things were important to you at that time. What are the things that you were learning in congruency with that at the time? What stage of life were you in? It's really helpful for the personal development side to have names and dates attributed to the things that you're learning, not just floating notes. The other thing that you can do with notes is you can have lists and bullet points. In softwares like typing and stuff like that, you can also have that. But what you can't do is have it as differentiated as I have it here. And so for, big main topics in this YouTube video that I was taking notes on, I have these circled numbers, and I can even, say this one actually comes before this one. And then I can have bullet points within those subcategories. One of the other things you can do with physical notes that you can't do with digital notes and those types of things is make diagrams of important concepts that you want to remember. So this is from a YouTube video by Alex Hormozy that I took notes on, that he outlined the entrepreneur life cycle, where he says, okay, well, there's uninformed optimism at the start, and then there's informed pessimism, and it comes down into the valley of despair, or the crisis of meaning. And either you can crash and burn and then start over, or you can go up into informed optimism and achievement for whatever entrepreneurial thing that you're wanting to do. And that's something that would have been really hard to write out in a type of, digital software. But because I was doing physical notes, I was able to just draw exactly what I was seeing. And just that little graphic gives me such insight into the type of idea that Alex was trying to expose in that video. That's something that is really important to do with written notes, is to maximize the flexibility that you have with written notes. The last thing I'd say is that you can dog ear particular pages so that you can easily find important information later. One of the books that I read last year was Poor Charlie's Almanac, which was a great book. I recommend that you read it. But it was 11 different talks by Charlie Munger. And this is one of the things that he talked about were the basic tendencies, psychological tendencies of people. So what I did, instead of writing down all of those things, I just printed out a copy, or I took a copy of the book and put it in my physical notebook. And then what I did is I dog-eared the top of the page. So now whenever I'm looking at my notebook, I know exactly where that page is, because I want it to be something that I remember and that I can go back to and revisit. And so those, I think, are all great ways that you can organize your notes in a way that's actually helpful and not just information floating out there somewhere. So what kind of things can I take notes on? It is totally up to you. What I take notes on are all kinds of different forms of media that present helpful information. And so that could be YouTube videos, that could be books, that could be podcasts. It could also be personal stuff. I write down ideas that I have for the business. I have ideas just for my personal development that I want to return to, or things that are intriguing me. Even meetings that I have at work, sometimes that I feel are important, I will sit down and I will bring this in the meeting with me and take physical notes. There's endless possibilities for how you can do this. So it's totally up to you. So after listening, I hope that you are convinced, at least in part, to try written notes. In a digital world where there's so much content and so much information, written notes have become a small little safe place for me to go to get away from the noise and just be there with my thoughts. So much of our attention is externalized these days, and being able to internalize and process through written notes has been huge for my own personal growth and satisfaction with life. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if there's anything that resonated with you. And with that being said, I will catch you in the next one.